Welcome to this Metstrade Connect Tech Talk session on connectivity and how innovation and advances in technology can potentially unlock the potential of boating. Joining me on the panel today, we have Erik Stromberg, who is the Power and Motor Yacht Product Director at Beneteau Group. We have Dibkey, who is the President of Advanced Systems Group at Brunswick. And we have Josh Wilson, who is Global Product Manager at Raymarine. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks. Connectivity, obviously one of the major hot topics at the moment. For the purposes of this discussion, I'd like to sort of look at the two angles of connectivity. First off, at the consumer side, the demands, the changing demands of consumers, and the consumer interface, and on the other side also how technology and the Internet of Things are transforming or have the potential to transform how we go about our business and the supply chain in the marine sector. So first off to you, Erik, if you don't mind, can we look at that consumer? And can you tell us from your experience working at the Beneteau Group and Prestige and other of the Beneteau brands, how you're seeing consumer demands changing in the last few months, and also what you're doing to embrace that change specifically at the Beneteau Group?
Well, thanks, Ed. I think what was interesting for us in this on the projects that we've done over the last 4 or 5 years, the first step for connectivity for us was to connect the items that are on board. So the air conditioners connected to all of the internal systems to be able to run the lights, all of that. So there was a lot of, we'll say, onboard connectivity that we really had to handle before we could start really outputting any of this off of the vessel itself. So that's been a primary focus with developments like the ship control system that we put into place, which is an onboard control and monitoring system. And then the initial projects that we had on connectivity from a distance has been focused on sort of this monitoring aspect of the yacht. And that has been something that I kind of talk about it as being sort of a connectivity 1.0, which was to say, okay, are my battery levels okay? Are my bilge pumps running and so forth? And that was kind of a big step. And what we see today, and that goes a little bit to your question about the Internet of Things, is that the next step of it is really what does that, being connected to the boat and for the boat to be connected itself, what kind of services can be provided through that link to be able to say output engine hours to your dealer allows the dealer to say, hey, I see that you're at 200 hours. How about I drop by next week and service the boat? So I think that sort of connectivity 2.0 is going to be, what does the connectivity bring me? What services do I get? What do I get out of it? And I like to use the analysis, and I steal a little bit from Josh here, but if you look at the MFD screens that are on the boats today, for a long time, it was about how many pixels they had. They were color, they were single touch, then they were multi-touch and so forth. And today they're so ubiquitous that the real differentiating factor of a multifunction display on board is what world it opens to you. What does it do for you? What does it connect to, and how do I use it? More than how many lines or how many pixels or how many colors that screen may have. So it's really, I think, connectivity, which started as kind of some sort of relay GSM box in the bottom of the boat that told you if your bilge pump had run, is going to come to be much more of a gateway to a whole range of services. Well,
let's talk about that gateway, Josh. Can you just come back to us on Raymarine and what you guys are doing? Because as Erik points out, it's that user interface has been transformed, hasn't it, recently?
Well, yeah, it's been a progressive process over the past, however many years. I think if you look at the helm of a powerboat from, say, 15 years ago compared to one today, you have dramatically more data coming into the system today. But when you look at it at a glance, you can see far less data. It's a far more condensed, slick, easy to understand user interface. So you're not getting this information overload, but the information is there if you need it. And if you kind of follow that general trajectory of where we were, where you had an individual hole in the dash that told you your oil pressure, an individual radar screen, an individual chart plotter, an individual depth gauge, and now it's all condensed into one piece of glass. It's a really kind of good looking and easy to use interface. You can kind of follow that trajectory forward into the future to tell where we're going to be in 10 years' time.
It's an interesting one because you talk about massive data collection on board and the user interface. The user, we're told, increasingly wants it simple, but is it the really interesting thing is that massive data and how that impacts the rest of the supply chain? And maybe we can bring you in here, Brett, to talk about what you guys are doing at Advanced Systems Group, bringing in all of those other components on a boat. So not just the sort of what we understand as the electronics on the dashboard, but also how the remote diagnostics and all those sort of things.
Yeah, I think as Erik and Josh are pointing out, maybe just to comment on the user experience first, I think what both are describing is an evolution underpinned by technology to a little bit more user-centric experiences on board. I think if you look at the experience on board today for most boaters, there is a fair amount of friction. There are a lot of interfaces, whether they're digital or not, and particularly for a lot of new entrants coming into the category, a lot of new boaters, oftentimes it's Greek to them. So I think the trend line you see is increasingly toward more user centricity and a better onboard user experience. And Ed, to your point, a lot of that not only is underpinned by technology, but data as well. And harvesting that data over time can ultimately help make the user experience better. The fact of the matter is, none of us really have complete visibility to how consumers are interacting on board. And by capturing data to understand in real time how they're interacting on board, potentially the friction they're experiencing, over time we can feed that back to the OEM boat builders to help them improve their product. But also through IoT and over-the-air updates, we can actually make that product better over time. Obviously, in today's environment, the boat you take delivery of is the best it's ever going to be on that day. I think the promise of collecting data and connectivity and IoT is to continuously improve that product over time, which I think is a real game changer for the industry.
The advances in technology are so rapid. They seem to be evolving at such a pace. Is the industry ready is that going to be the key challenge? I mean, we talk about remote diagnostics and service, and telling you that you've done X hundred hours on your engine. Is the supply chain ready for these advances?
In my view, I would say the entire industry is going to go through a transformative period in the next 5 years. The folks at BBG don't like when I say this. I think it's true that if you look at the industry and the product, by and large, over the last 50 years, there really hasn't been revolution. It's been more evolutionary type change. I think in order to see revolution in the industry, to lower the barrier to entry for new entrants and new consumers, you're going to need to see transformation up, down, and sideways across the industry, from OEM boat builders to servicer dealers to the onboard experience. I've just been in the industry now for a little less than a year, so I'm probably not the best person to comment on this. Erik and Josh may have certainly a more informed point of view than I do, but I do see a lot of momentum toward transformation at every node of the value chain. I think OEMs are transforming, suppliers like Advanced Systems Group are transforming, dealer servicers are transforming. So it's not going to happen overnight. And so, Ed, I'm not sure we're ready quite yet, but I do think you're going to see a transformative change in the industry within 5 years.
But in that 5 years, Josh, you talked about, looking back at how we've seen these changes in the last 5 or 10 years, as an arc, you know, a sort of a trajectory.
Probably more of an exponential, really. It's getting faster and faster, for sure.
But obviously that as we discussed, throws up its considerable challenges. And you know, we talk about other industries, we talk about what you expect from your smartphone, etc. But obviously, as we find out in boating, being offshore, 20 miles offshore, you know, it's a different world, isn't it? What are the challenges? What are the key issues that we're going to face?
Well, I think that we do have a bit of a skills shortage, particularly in the servicing side of things, in the aftermarket industry, particularly with the exponential increase in pace that the technology is on. I think that's a serious problem. I don't think there's really a silver bullet solution to that problem, but I think just as manufacturers, we need to really kind of pick up some of the responsibility there to upskill the rest of that supply chain and those guys that are actually kind of repairing and diagnosing these faults. But obviously, as the electronics become more complex, yes, that's a problem, but connectivity is not necessarily just a problem. It's also part of the solution. And I think when you're talking about remote connectivity and remote diagnostics and those kinds of things, that's just the perfect example of that, is that the tech is the solution rather than the problem. And that's certainly the direction that we're heading in terms of remote access for diagnostics and things like that. And it's already something that we're doing. And you're only going to see more and more of that as kind of bulk data collection starts becoming more part of the picture. And then you can look at things like, preemptive maintenance rather than being reactive.
I agree with that, yeah.
Erik, just bringing you in, the preemptive maintenance is obviously a key one. You know, are you working more closely now? I guess you work a lot more closely with with Brett and Josh and the companies to because obviously the connectivity, everything's got to be connected. So I guess as an OEM, you've got to really think long and hard at the design stage about this.
For sure, but I agree with with what Brett said, that there is a real movement afoot. You know, I wouldn't have said that 5 years ago. But we see today in our dealer networks and so forth, the majority of them that are out there servicing, have built their own task software and ways to communicate and so forth. So we see more of these back office applications that allow for much better servicing of the customers on the ground. If we can interface into those sort of service networks, information from our end on preventative maintenance, from the engine suppliers, from ourselves or our other suppliers, which again they are also stepping up more and more, and put that in the hands of the client on board through applications and so forth. I think we start to close that circle, which today has lots of bits and pieces. But still, the first call, for service, the technician comes down to the boat and reads off an error code on the display of the engine or the air conditioner or something like that, and then he knows what part that he needs to get and so forth. And the idea would be that error code, which is already digitalized today by our suppliers, gets outputted off of the yacht and put in the hands of the dealer or the service technician, so that he arrives with the part that the error code is identified. So there are already relatively smart systems on board, but that only speak to people when you're on board.
Sorry, just to contribute one additional thought there. I think even an evolution beyond that is before you get to the point of the error code, and through data collection, being able to do more predictive
and analytical,
and predicting the failure before it occurs. That's really when you get to not only a step function transformation within the value chain, but a step function improvement in the overall end consumer experience, because the issue is resolved before it even manifests for the consumer.
And I guess this has, looking longer term, this has the real potential for the boat builder to understand how their boat is being used and to input into the design process. And at some point, will you be having seeing how people move through cabins and use different spaces on board? Is that the sort of next step?
Well, I think we'd be starting from capturing sort of some metadata around the things that are movement around the boat, maybe one that is a little bit more difficult to capture, but to be able to say, you know, how much time in a day, obviously the people are, you know, running the engine, running the generator, using the refrigerator, you know, what systems are they using on board, and these sorts of things. These will certainly influence the design process in different ways. Today we can do a survey, but it's only a percentage of what you do, and this kind of metadata to say, okay, people are using the generator 3.5 hours a day, they're traveling less than 20 nautical miles a day, et cetera. These sorts of things would really let us to go into a design process to much better respond to the way the customers are using the yachts today.
I mean, for you guys, what are the sort of the holy grails, as it were, for you know, if you want to see a boat in 5 years' time, where do you think the industry will be? Can I put that to each one of you, Josh?
Yeah, sure. I think the two main things that really excite me the most in the next kind of 5 years are the new low orbit satellite broadband networks that are currently in testing, which the implication of that is basically high speed, really affordable internet access literally anywhere on the surface of the earth. And the implications that that is going to have for our industry are just going to be absolutely huge. I mean, not only is it going to give us kind of continual access, a high-speed, secure access to the cloud to do all the things that we've been talking about before with data collection and preventative maintenance, but it's also going to open up an entirely new consumer market of kind of young professionals who want to live the dream of going on long cruising holidays or even living aboard, but not needing to accumulate enough kind of wealth to retire. And I think the implications of that are just going to be absolutely huge, because they're going to be this huge buying force within the industry that's kind of come out of nowhere. But the biggest thing, and I think potentially the coolest thing about that from the kind of tech supplier's perspective is the implications that's going to have for machine learning and AI. Constant cloud connectivity, constant feedback from all of these sensors is going to give us the access to the level of data that we need to properly train these machines to then, you know, perform autonomous or more mainly like assisted navigation functions.
And for you, Brett, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I largely agree with everything Josh said. I think, 5 years from now, boats in general will be more adaptive and responsive to areas that present significant consumer friction today. I think the promise and the unlock of all this data capture is predicated on solving real problems or issues or improving the end user and consumer experience. So, some time horizon, 5 years from now, I'm not sure exactly what the timeline is, but, key areas of friction, docking the boat, anchoring, trailering, those issues that create a lot of anxiety and I think are a barrier to entry for new entrants. I believe there will be a fundamentally different experience enabled through technology for end consumers. And I think that can be a game changer for the collective industry.
On Erik?
Well, I think some very good things have been said, and I totally agree that that what we're looking for is to create a more of a comfortable and assisted world, not necessarily autonomous. I think most people want to go boating to enjoy the notion of boating, but to be able to take some of that stress out of the various moments of boating that we've all experienced. I think that if I was going to add something to what Josh and Brett have said, I would continue with this idea that the onboard integration of the various systems from all of the different suppliers that we use, it has to be also part of the goal. And a 5-year goal would be that every particular item on board of a motor yacht, for example, would be intelligent enough to be tracked, to be serviced, to be communicating with the user, with the dealer, and so forth. And that in some of the major systems has moved forward, but I think that we have to continue to roll out more intelligent systems on board that will then generate the data, that will then create the machine learning and so forth that we'll be able to capture tomorrow.
And all this, one of the crucial things about the industry now we have to talk about is affordability. And all of this, you know, if the technology is proven, is out there, this won't impact that element. This is not going to make boats terribly a lot more expensive, is it?
No, not really. I mean, because if you look, I mean, today the majority of things are connected. There are a variety of norms, the MMA norms and so forth. So there are the NEMA norms. So there's these sorts of systems. It's just putting the right systems on and then having the right connectivity and the right ability to treat the data and so forth. But the intelligent bilge pump that knows when it's running or not is no more expensive than the one we used before. So it's the whole network of services and everything that we can put into place around it, but it has a real notion to deliver much better customer experience at a roughly equal price to today.
It's interesting. I mean, just harking back to what Brett said about transformation, a transformative period. Are we on the cusp of a new sort of age for boating, do you think? Do you think technology could open up, as Josh has referred to, a whole new potential buyer out there?
For us, it's yeah, it is, and certainly on the smaller end. I mean, even if we look at the market that we just went through this past summer, we saw an incredible amount of new people come into the market, and to be able to keep those people in the market and to bring in more people, we really have to make this experience as much of a pleasurable experience. That's what we're selling. It's what we're telling people. It's what we're showing. It's not always the experience that people have when they get into boating. And so if we cannot deliver on these promises to make it simpler, easier, more transparent, more visibility towards the costs, take the anxiety out, and so forth, then we will lose the customers that we brought in, and we will have trouble bringing more people in the future.
On that note, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I've got to draw it to a conclusion, but I hope your predictions, and I think your predictions are spot on about where we're going to be. It's an exciting time.